Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
From his name Mike, buddies once cut out the ridiculous in the US Michael, so it went. Michael was his name in high school, then in the zone, where he was driven right after his 18th birthday. And now, years later, when he became a truck driver, no one called him anything else, not even his brother John. If there was a decent gap between trips, Michael settled down with his brother. He, more than anyone, understood why his brother decided to take up farming, and it was too hard for both of them to live with people, to adjust, to tolerate, to adapt. John had chosen his own kind of quiet, a house in the middle of nowhere, only the voices of animals. He kept pedigree goats, and they were quite noisy creatures. But his workers were a selection of silent, middle-aged men, honest, undrinking, and hardworking. Others didn't stick around, and since John paid his men very well, if these workers were fired tomorrow, others would line up, expecting to get a place. Michael had his own special way of shutting people out. There was no greater loneliness than being alone in a crowd. He had learned that when he was still in the zone, and solitude was a dream. But one could immerse oneself in one's own thoughts, and no one had access there. And now, the road was flowing under the wheels of his truck, and music was playing in his headphones, helping him to shut himself off from the world. Michael didn't like this stretch of road. Though the mountains were low, the highway descended from them in a winding ribbon, a real serpentine. He had to drive slowly. Another car could appear from the corner at a moment's notice, and the road surface, damn it. From time to time there were potholes. Just keep your eyes open. And now it's foggy. It would have been better not to go on a trip today, not to risk the cargo, to wait a day. But Michael risked it. The fact that he drove so slowly allowed him to avoid trouble. He not only noticed the fragile body lying on the road, but also braked in time. Michael had never hit a single person in his entire career. He's never even killed a dog. Chauffeurs have an omen. If a dog is under the wheels, the next one will be a man. But on Michael's conscience were only birds, which occasionally crashed into the windshield. The man jumped to the ground and hurried to the lying. A child, a teenager, but bending over the body, he realized that it was a girl, very young, maybe a high school student. She lay as if she were dead tired and had fallen asleep, snuggled against the ground. Her blonde hair, cut in a bob, partially covered her face, pale, without makeup. Windbreaker jacket, jeans, sneakers. The girl was dressed without pretension. Small hand, thin fingers, on one of them, a penny bead ring. Michael expected to see a pool of blood. But there was no blood, none at all, unless you counted the abrasion on the girl's cheek. And the man made up his mind, carefully took the girl's wrist, and as the school nurse had taught him long ago, he tried to feel the pulse with 3 fingers at once. The stranger was alive. Her pulse, though weak, was beating under his hand. Michael called for an ambulance. He knew that the car would come quickly. There was a special program. For such accidents the crews come first. But still it was impossible to leave the girl here. At any moment, cars could appear on the road. Michael still risked a little time. He brought a plate from his truck, spread it on the side of the road, and then gently picked up the girl and carried her there. The man didn't know if he could touch her. She might scream in pain if she moved. But she was silent. That was bad. Apparently, the shock was so deep that the pain couldn't get through. Who the hell hit a girl and drove off? I understand. Everyone cares about his own skin, but to leave a senseless body in the middle of the road. Michael squatted beside the girl, smoking and waiting. The paramedics did arrive quickly. 2 trim middle-aged women came out with gloves on and leaned over the victim. In the old days, Paramedics didn't wear gloves. Now everyone's afraid of AIDS and other contagions. Did you hit her? A paramedic gave Michael a sidelong glance. No, my God, I found her. She's pretty bad, huh? Well, what can I say? The woman's voice was tired. Basic vitals only. Low blood pressure, weak pulse. Let's take her to traumatology. Are you guys gonna stay here and wait for the police? I'm coming with you, Michael decided. It was against all the rules. If it was he who hit the girl and then got into his car, he could so easily a few hundred meters away from the ambulance, leave, and let them look for him. Moreover, he had such a past, the police would be sure to pick on him. But he really decided to go, to make sure that the girl was more or less all right. Michael carried her to the car himself. He knew the last thing an ambulance driver wanted to do was carry a stretcher. Although he often had to do that, at the trauma center, Michael waited a long time. Then the police arrived at the same time, and the doctor who had admitted the girl came out. Fortunately, she had her papers on her, he said, and then through to the guards. This man had nothing to do with it. The girl is dehydrated, has a severe nervous breakdown, and that's it. She was given a sedative. She will come to her senses. She will tell everything herself. Now she is asleep. The doctor handed the girl's passport to one of the police officers, and he made Michael a sign to wait. I must write down your statement anyway, he said, and opened the passport. Do you know Nellie? Who? Michael suddenly lost his tongue. What did you say her name was? He turned pale and involuntarily grabbed the windowsill. His legs wouldn't hold him. The brothers, Michael and John, had once grown up in a nice, close-knit family. Their father was in business, and their mother, a nurse by profession, after giving birth to 2 boys one after the other, sat at home with them. The father's business was becoming more and more successful. Harvey was a responsible, honest man, a master of golden hands. His word could always be relied on. And gradually, the number of customers multiplied, the business expanded. The family moved into a large new house. The mother enjoyed the fact that it is so spacious, bright, beautiful. A lot of time devoted to the garden. Around the house she created a real paradise. The growing sons made plans. The eldest, John, from childhood loved animals and wanted to work in the future at the stud farm, breed thoroughbred horses. Mike was truly in love with traveling. For him, there was no better leisure than a tour. Together with friends he went live foot the whole region, and hoped that his future specialty will be associated with trips to somewhere in the protected points of the earth. He was beckoned by professions, the very names of which sounded styptic: oceanologist, volcanologist, but none of this was destined to come true. His father was framed by a partner whom he trusted as himself. It happened when they were planning a big project together. In a short time, Harvey was not only broke, he had a huge, by the standards of the family, debts. Had to sell everything, and a new house, and 2 cars, and a little jewelry mother, good furniture, expensive phones. Harvey sought to pay off those to whom he remained owed, to the maximum. And when there was nothing left to give, the man disappeared. For several days he was in a severe depression. His wife felt that the case is bad. A psychiatrist was invited to the house, but he recommended that the patient be placed in hospital as soon as possible. Harvey categorically refused to lie down in the asylum. Sometime took the prescribed medication, and then just disappeared. In the morning his wife did not find him in bed. No one heard the man leave the house. None of the neighbors saw him either. Much later, his folded clothes and shoes were found on the riverbank. The investigator assumed that Harvey thus decided to hide from debts because the body was never found. But relatives had no doubt he had passed away. Too heavy a burden had been weighing on him lately. The guilt was eating away at him. Now the family lived in the cheapest apartment they could find. 1 room for everyone. John was already studying at the Agricultural Academy at the time, living in the dormitory, coming for vacations. He wanted to drop out and go to work, but his mother insisted that the eldest son should graduate and get a diploma. "We'll manage somehow," she persuaded. "You have a little time left. I'll get a job. Nurses are always needed. And then Mike will finish school, get back on his feet." Mom did find a place. She was hired at a hospice. Of course, this institution had nothing in common with the best hospices for the seriously ill. The dilapidated building of the nursing home had been renovated, and they gathered there hopelessly ill old people who were no longer needed by their loved ones. The mother was shocked when on the first day she saw an old woman covered head to toe in a semi-dark room. Was she dead? Alive for now, but still about to die. Let her rest in peace. Meanwhile, the staff were quietly drinking tea. Of course, Mom couldn't treat her charges like that. Like her husband, she worked not for fear, but for conscience, did everything to ease the condition of patients, to make their lives easier. And her co-workers didn't like her. No, my mother was not going to leave, because she understood that without her the old people would be even harder. But her illness had taken its toll. The terrible stresses she had to endure lately had an impact. If the family had the former opportunities, most likely, my mother would have been able to put on her feet. But now she died quietly. By the time of her funeral, Michael had already graduated from high school. He was 18 years old, and out of grief, he went to see the man he thought was responsible for everything. Because of his father's partner, this Austin actually ceased to exist in their family. If not for the meanness of this man, and the father would be alive, and most likely, the mother. The meeting ended tragically for the guy. He waited for Austin on the street and attacked him, although the businessman had a security guard with him. Michael was twisted, taken away, and later Austin ensured that the young man received a sentence. Michael was also accused of drug distribution. The businessman realized that he couldn't let a guy with his explosive temper go free. Sooner or later he would attack again, and God knows how it would end. Let him sit behind the barbed wire to cool down. No one supported the brothers at this time. Former acquaintances believed in the younger one's guilt. The older one was avoided like the plague. John was abandoned by the girl with whom he began to meet. Her relatives categorically forbade her to connect her life with a family of drug addicts. That's when John lost faith in people. He sold a small city apartment, bought a house in the village, and took up his farm. He worked without sparing himself. He had everything he needed: the necessary knowledge, diligence, practical wit. And in time he became a farmer who stood quite firmly on his feet. He did not try to buy breeding horses. He could not afford them. He raised thoroughbred goats, processed milk, kept poultry. When the younger brother was free, the older one called him to come to him. "Thank you," Michael said sincerely. "Maybe later. I want to try it myself first." Austin had hoped in vain. Michael never quite got over him. Out of the corner of his eye, he continued to follow the businessman's life. He knew that he had been married for many years, but the couple had never had children. Then Austin found himself a girlfriend somewhere on the side, and when he had a daughter, immediately took her away from her mother. It seems that no one asked the young mother's consent to this. Austin believed that money solves all issues. He paid whoever he had to pay and got the child, but his wife had never been able to get attached to the girl. Her very existence was an eternal reminder of her husband's infidelity. Therefore, when Nellie grew up, she was determined first in one school, boarding school, then in another. Had to transfer Nellie from one institution to another. The character of the girl were complex. Michael did not know whether ever again cross the roads of himself and the businessman who broke his family's life. But he really hoped so. Can't they just stay home until September? Angelica sat over the list of boarders who had to be taken on vacation and grumbled, knowing that it would do nothing. It would only allow her to get a bit of a release. The boarding house was female, or rather, maiden, elite and closed. At the end of spring, exams were held here, as always. Under other circumstances, most of the girls would have gone to their families for the summer, but not everyone is ready to take their own children even for a few months. Businessmen and their wives are busy people. For the girls who had to stay at the boarding house for the summer, they organized a trip of some kind. The geographical scope was very wide. Parents willingly splurged, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, and the daughters are happy, and themselves, freedom. But this summer, the second summer in quarantine, has confused all the plans. It was impossible to travel, at least to places attractive and crowded at the same time. But the remaining girls, numbering a little more than 10, were not going to go home, nor were they willing to stay in the boarding house until the beginning of September. 2 tutors were left to look after the girls: Natalie, a gray-haired strict lady, and Angelica, a history teacher. Angelica Petrovna was 35 years old, a knowledgeable teacher, but the girls considered her the softest of the teaching staff, considered her her own, and did not always obey. Both women puzzled over what to do with the boarders in July and August, and could offer them nothing but the library, watching movies and tennis. "They'll drive us crazy," Natalie said uneducationally. But then a friend of hers, a woman who was professionally engaged in tourism, showed up and suggested an option: a nobleman's estate in the middle of nowhere. "Very interesting peninsula where it stands, very interesting," Julia said. "A very picturesque place. The lake, the high cliffs, how many birds nest there. A meteorite fell in these parts, and there is a memorial sign there. Again, the remains of an ancient settlement. Those who are fond of history, you can't drag them away by their ears. And the lake itself is indescribable beauty. What views! Are there no artists among your girls? Tell me about the estate itself." Natalie interrupted the flow of eloquence. Julia went into detail. It's a 19th century manor house. Not all of it has been restored, but one wing has already been converted into a kind of hotel. But people don't come there for a long time. It's boring for today's spoiled tourists. For now. Then, of course, they will organize a lot of entertainment there. But for now, well-to-do people stay there for a few days, to get married, to relax with fishing and photo hunting, and so on. Do you think our girls would be satisfied with that?" Natalie asked skeptically. "They are not primarily interested in the beauty of nature, but in entertainment. You can go boating." Julia began to enumerate. "On the other side of the village, there is an abandoned temple, very picturesque. I'll keep silent. There is a horse club, a store. It wouldn't be difficult to arrange excursions in the neighborhood. Well there, exotics of all sorts with a peasant bent. Raking hay, milking a goat." Natalie only sighed heavily, remembering Nancy Prokhorov's manicure, each nail like a painted dagger. It was the kind of thing you could only milk. Not to mention the fact that she's afraid of the Carolina wildlife, starting with mosquitoes and ants. It's much later they learn that there are vipers on the island, and sometimes bears wander there, that there are swamps around the only road leading to the mainland, that all amenities are limited to hot and cold water and electricity, that all amenities are limited to hot and cold water and electricity, that you can call your relatives with great difficulty and not always. Cell phones catch only on a tiny patch, which they find by chance. A step to the left, a step to the right, and there is no connection. All this will be later. For now, Natalie sighed. Well, for a change, let's offer the girls this option. Angelica will give them a historical excursion. The girls became animated and expressed their desire to go to the peninsula. Maybe they, the satiated, are waiting there for some new impressions. In extreme case, it will be possible to wrinkle their noses and say, "Fie, where have they taken us?" And at the last minute, Angelique thought, they threw in a new boarder. We don't have enough to worry about. You're always wary when you take in another girl. How will the others take to her? How will she settle in on her own? And now, well, the right is not up to her. The girl was brought by a governess, but the documents were in order and the payment for the girl had been made. so there was no reason to refuse. The attendant did not ask the questions to which Angelica was accustomed. Accepting new wards, what are the living conditions? Can we see the bedrooms? What are they fed with? Who of the teachers to call if the girl complains that she is being abused? What's the situation here? It is clear that it is not the army. We are not talking about hazing. But girls can bully the new girl if they don't like her. No conditions, no asking for supervision. Angelica even felt that it was not a new boarder, but a girl who would be working here. Nellie looked away, not showing any feelings, neither regret nor joy that she had come to the boarding house. The other girls usually chirped, remembering 1,000 little things they'd forgotten to say, asking her to give this and that, not to forget about this, to call, to send pictures. Some of them wiped away tears. Nellie looked past the governess and looked frozen. Angelica was wary. There was no telling how the girl would behave. In any case, she must be encouraged. The teacher approached with a soft smile, put a palm on the new girl's shoulder. "Come on, I'll take you to the dormitory and introduce you to the girls." She waited for some clue to start a conversation. The new girl would ask something, share something. But Nellie was silent. The shoulder under Angelica's arm was so thin and bony that the teacher thought, "We should tell the canteen to give her bigger portions. And for the afternoon snack, they should give not 1, but 2 buns." Angelica immediately realized that the new girl would not like Casey, a girl who looked older than her years because of her rough facial features and excessive weight. Casey passionately wanted to lose weight, wrote out in a notebook different diets, did morning exercises, but to really fight with herself, she was not able to. Food produced on Olia even some kind of narcotic effect. She was in a good mood, and even in euphoria, when she ate to the brim so that it was hard to breathe. A look in the mirror always spoiled Ola's mood. She always went to the shower alone, so her friends wouldn't see her shapeless body. Casey disliked all the girls who stayed thin without any effort, and the new girl would certainly be among them. "I'll put her with Caroline and Veronica." Angelica decided, "It's only for one night, we're leaving tomorrow. And during the vacation the girl will probably make friends with someone else and move in with her new companions." Although all the boarders were from well-to-do families, they were not entitled to separate rooms. Both the little girls and the older grown-up girls lived in 3s and 4s. There was a free place in the corner room, where they were not exactly friends. They were too different, but the girls were calm and not scandalous. Veronica was the tallest of the boarders. Natural blonde, her hair almost white, curled at the shoulders. Her features were small, her nose was upturned, and her eyes were blue. If it weren't for the height of a basketball player, Veronica would have many admirers. And that's all she needed. That's all she was interested in. Boys, young men, men. Veronica really wanted them to like her. She never talked about what she wanted to become, what profession to get, but she dreamed of future marriage all the time. Her neighbor Caroline was a girl who was rarely ugly, although it would seem a wonderful combination, blue eyes and dark brown hair. But her facial features were wrong. Her eyes were too close set, and she had a large, long nose. Despite her unattractive appearance, Caroline was pleasant to talk to. Her family was considered one of the richest in the city, her parents owning several travel agencies. She had the best of everything: expensive clothes, cosmetics, and little things that other girls could only dream about. At the same time, she was very simple, not arrogant, and interesting to talk to. She had traveled to many countries and was an excellent storyteller. Angelica knew that in this room, with these girls, no one would poison Nellie. "Except the new neighbor," said Angelica, opening the door with a smile. "Nellie, this is Caroline, and this is Veronica. I think you will find a common language without problems." Nellie immediately realized which bed was meant for her. This one, by the door, tucked in. It was getting dark outside the window, and the girls were sitting on their beds with their feet up. Caroline was at the window, with her legs twisted Turkish style, and Veronica at the wall, wrapped in a downy shawl. They seemed to be talking about something, and this fascinating conversation was interrupted. They looked at the newcomer with curiosity, but it was quite friendly. "Well," Veronica asked, as soon as Angelica closed the door behind her, "where did you come from? Why at the end of the year and not at the beginning?" You should know where from, Nellie thought, remembering her father's house, which always reminded her of a prison. The name of the town she had dropped in passing. So far away. Veronica was surprised. Don't they have their own schools there? You want to learn foreign languages, don't you? Caroline asked understandingly. They are very good at it. You won't find another school like it in the United States. And you will go with us tomorrow? Veronica continued to inquire. That's really from ship to bowl. It took me a long time to get used to the boarding house, and you'll have to change several places at once. I remember the thing I didn't like the most was that it was like a restricted area. You can't go outside the gate without permission. The same faces everywhere. Parents come only on weekends, and they only let us go home for vacations. Teachers are old women, no one to fall in love with. That was the main reason for her longing, Caroline explained to the new girl, Veronica. I guess it will be the same problem wherever they send us. We're behind a high fence as usual. And in the neighboring village, the male population is a couple of oxen and a shepherd at best. Ugh, Veronica reached for the dressing table. It was her main habit to look in the mirror every now and then. She would fix her golden curl, or tint her eyelashes, or simply turn her face left and right in front of the mirror, making sure that everything was all right. Nellie, do you want to come along? I'll show you the guest house, where everything is. The new girl hesitated for a couple of moments, and then sincerely asked, "Why?" Nellie knew she was unlikely to return here, but the girls looked at the new girl strangely. Once more they were convinced of this when they went to bed. They were used to long chats before going to bed, but now there was a new person in the room, and the girls arranged the conversation so as not to mention anything personal, but at the same time to touch on such topics that Nellie could join in the conversation. But the new girl was silent. She was awake. She turned over from side to side, sighed, but she did not say a word. But in the morning, when the girls woke up, Nellie was already ready. She was sitting on the made-up bed, fully dressed. Her bag stood at her feet. The new girl was looking out the window. At another time, the flower beds and stone-paved paths would have seemed very beautiful to her. But on this day, it was a grey, rainy morning, and the courtyard looked uncomfortable. She wanted to wrap herself in a warm blanket and go back to sleep. God, why did you get up so early? Caroline wondered. We're not in the army. They won't leave without us. As soon as Angelica knocks on our door, we can count down 2 more hours. Veronica won't get ready before then anyway. And really only after the mentor walked lightly down the corridor and beat a light beat with her fingers on each door, the guest house began to come to life. A huge white tourist bus had already slowly pulled into the courtyard, and the girls were still sitting in the dining room, drinking cocoa with hot buns and chatting. No one was in a hurry. Natalie came in and clapped her hands, waiting for the noise to die down. If any of you are fans of the movie Home Alone, we can provide, she said. Why the bus? Why not a plane? Nancy grumbled. It's a long drive. Nancy's voice was hoarse, maybe because she smoked a lot in secret. Of course, she knew it, because Nancy smelled like tobacco a mile away. But the main thing was to keep the rule. Not to smoke openly, not to get caught with a cigarette in front of the teachers. Ira went along with it. She followed the rules. The girls singled out Nancy. First of all, she always had expensive cigarettes, and secondly, she was a computer god. She knew programs as well as a computer teacher. We've already explained it to you several times, Natalie sighed. There's a virus running rampant in the world. On the bus, contact will be kept to a minimum, and on the plane, in airports. Anyway, in 15 minutes, I'm waiting for everyone in the courtyard. boarding is starting, and we left in an hour. Lucy, a short girl, with a face as delicate as a baby's, was the last to emerge from the boarding house, her eyes half closed, her movements slow. It was impossible to imagine her in a hurry. Looking at Lucy, she seemed to be dozing all the time, eyes half closed, movements slow, and in a hurry. It was impossible to imagine. She was the best in the boarding house in foreign languages. Caroline promised her a career in the travel business. I might want to be a diplomat. I like civilization, amenities, figuratively speaking, caviar on a silver tray. All this field life is not for me. Lucy wrinkled her nose. Mosquitoes, nature, Earth. Now she didn't want to go at all, but she didn't want to stay alone in a boarding house. I don't need manna from heaven. I just want a bath, and a cozy apartment. With or without a mezzanine. I'd like a villa, I'd like a summer house. And a Mercedes. Right, Lucy? Nancy was pushing her overweight bag into the luggage compartment. Hey, girls, you can't sit in the front 2 seats. Natalie and I already took them. Nancy, what kind of expression is that, girls? Pardon me, Natalie. Girls, don't take the best seats because they're meant for Natalie and I's ass. Natalie just waved her hand, and Nellie found herself alone on the bus. She hadn't managed to make friends with anyone during that 24 hours, and to tell the truth, she hadn't done anything for that. That's no good. She needed to learn more about these girls, their habits, their dreams, even their whims, if she was to live with them, until her father decided to move her elsewhere. But right now, Nellie had no regrets about being alone in the back row the whole way. She covered her eyes and felt the bus move, slowly pulling on. It's all right, she told the teacher. Let them do as they please. There won't be any guests here till fall anyway, except for you, and you are. Natalie began. I'm Mallory, the cook. I'll be cooking for your girls. That's great. There doesn't seem to be much in the way of entertainment here. So, Mallory, we'd appreciate it if you could teach our girls something simple. You know, bake buns or something. They need something to keep them busy. I understand it's best to stay close to the estate. On the road, why not? Let them walk. I ride my bike home to the village myself. There's our village on the other side of the lake. You can still get there by motorboat. But just in the forest, it's really better not to go alone. The local kids go, but your girls are pampered. They might get into trouble. Like what? Natalie asked quickly. Mallory hesitated. Well, the first thing is the marshes. It doesn't take long for a girl to be tempted by berries, a clearing, a step, and she's in the mire. Our locals always try to walk in 2s and 3s. If one falls through, the other pulls him out. A snake bites. Also, not deadly, of course, but unpleasant. We still need to get to medical help. Can't you call an ambulance here? In the 21st century? Mallory shook her head. You can't even get a signal out here all the time. Sometimes the phones go dead, and that's it. So the best thing to do is to get the victim into a motorboat and get to the other side of the river. There is a medical center there, and if it is closed, the paramedic lives in the village itself. You can run straight home to her. Yes, Angelica was very calm, but she couldn't take it anymore. I doubt if there will ever be a tourist center here. I wouldn't even recommend it to hunters. Why not? Mallory's voice was full of resentment. If the old Earl's place is the one they'll definitely come to. Especially those young, crazy people. I beg your pardon. Natalie looked puzzled. What count? We're in his house now. Mallory's tone changed. If she had been shy before, as if she were embarrassed to speak in front of the city women, she knew the subject, and her embarrassment disappeared. I keep saying, if it were in Europe, they'd probably burn him at the stake, that Billy. We say, Mallory lowered her voice, that he was deported. And not for any treason, not for freethinking, not for embezzlement, not for dueling, but he was a ghoul. Who? Angelica even wrinkled her nose. Him. And at the same time, the first in his time, handsome and rich, I saw the portrait. They're all funny-looking men in those old portraits. White faces, like women's, delicate. Wigs, and they wore makeup, these gentlemen. Mallory, you're confusing the 18th century with the 18th century. Well, it's all the same. They're just so refined, so feminine. And Billy, you can't take your eyes off him. His gaze is fiery, his features are outlined with a chisel. I'm telling the truth, it's his charm, it's through the ages. You stand in front of the portrait, ready to fall in love with the canvas and the colors. I guess not many women could resist him in life. But Billy was unmarried and never had a bride. But he brought up serf girls, and that's all, as soon as they were brought to his estate. So in a short time, they were as if in water, and there was no trace of them. It seems that he had a secret cemetery in the forest, about which only one of his closest servants knew. And if the master was as handsome as an angel, then this servant was scarier than the devil himself, a one-eyed one at that. At that time, the authorities did not stand up for the serf's brother, or rather, sister, and for a long time this case did not come to light. Until at last, the parents of one of the girls found an opportunity to come and throw themselves at the feet of an important person. Mallory put her hand to her cheek as they began to investigate, and it turned out that there was a graveyard full of girls who had disappeared, if the Earl had really sent them to the next world. That's when they sent Billy here to the middle of nowhere, and they say he accepted the Tsar's sentence without objection. He didn't want to live in the village. He settled on this peninsula, and they built him a house here. Rumors spread quickly, and no local woman wanted to serve the Baron. The people knew that he had several men in his servants, and the chief over them was this one-eyed devil. They also noticed that from time to time the only road that leads here is hidden by fog, and then it is impossible to get to the Count's house at all. It's like a blind man traveling off-road. It wasn't like that before, only since the Lord settled here. And when girls started to disappear in the village, people went to the local priest in a crowd. He was an old priest, over 80 years old. He said, "Get out of here. Move so far away that even the longest winter night would not reach you. I can't bless you to go with stakes against the Baron or to burn his house. Neither you nor I will be well off. Go away." And the village was deserted for a long time. It was probably much later, after the Civil War, that people began to settle here. The Count's house stood abandoned. They tried to open something here, an orphanage, an office of some kind, but it was inconveniently far away, on the outskirts of the village, and there was this fog. It descends on the peninsula from time to time, closing it from the world. "Where's the Count gone?" "He's buried nearby," Mallory explained, "but we don't know what he died of. There's a rumor going around. Some people say that without fresh blood, the Earl grew old and died. Others say that a priest was left in the village, and it was he who killed him with his prayers. It's also known that the crypt with Billy's body was near the church, inside the church fence. It's all destroyed now, torn apart. Of course, there were those who broke into the crypt. They thought they could make a fortune there. And the church, first the new authorities made it a warehouse, then it fell into disrepair. Now there are only ruins there. But the body, did they find the body?" "I don't know anything." Mallory shook her head. "Maybe the one who first entered the crypt, the one who saw the coffin, the deceased himself. But no one would admit to it. Everyone I talked to said there was nothing there. It was empty. We thought the Count's house would suffer the same fate. It would fall into ruin. But no, young people came here, walked around, wowed, 19th century mansion, beautifully preserved, and decided to make it a tourist attraction. They finished one wing. Now guests come here from time to time. Well, more rich men. To go fishing, then to take a bath. The fishing here is excellent. I make soup out of the catch every time and serve it to them with vodka. But if we declare these lands the final resting place of the ghoul, then all sorts of crazy people will come here in droves. You know, The kind who dress in black, spend nights in graveyards. Ah, that's what I meant when I said you could make a name for yourself. I was very surprised that the girls were brought here. Of course, nothing's happened here for 1,000 years, but people still think it's a bad place, especially for such young girls. It so happened that Nellie was alone. All the girls are in rooms of 2. Angeliki decided to settle in 3s, and now Nellie had no roommate. And it was the farthest room, right by the stairs. Caroline looked in, her eyebrows narrowed pitifully. Well, do you want? Let's ask Angelica, and you and Veronica will move in with us. Nellie shook her head. She realized that, in fact, the girls didn't really want to cramp up. They hadn't had time to like the new girl or get attached to her. Caroline was just being kind. Nellie looked at her room from a special point of view. She went to the window. Neither trees nor bushes obstructed the view. Ahead was the green lawn, beyond it the surface of the lake. The village is visible on the other shore. The roofs of the houses, the dark purple bricks of the dilapidated church. No one can approach the house unnoticed. That's good. Nellie jerked the frame, realized it opened inward, and the deadbolt was tight enough that it would take a few extra seconds to get through it. The door, on the other hand, is just a hook, very flimsy, symbolic. The walls in the house were very thick, and Nellie could not hear what was going on in the next room. But the sounds from the corridor could be heard perfectly well, and the creaking of the floorboards. They, too, would be her watchmen. These creaking floorboards would warn her of what was going on. Later, Nellie heard Mallory's story. She wanted to pass on, but the words about the Earl and the thick fog made her linger, stand by the stairs where her companions could not see her. There she stood until the women had finished speaking. The voices of the teachers were hard, confident, exhorting. Nellie realized that they did not believe the cook at all. They considered everything she had said to be local legends. Please don't tell the girls these horror stories, Natalie asked. Even though they're big girls, they might be frightened of the black hand or the red spot. Ariana is a great storyteller. She'll scare you so badly that you'll scream, and Angelica, and I'll be running around the room with Valerian half the night. Do you know how it goes in our boarding house? Lighters. But they didn't go out that day. Angelique promised they'd do it later. She'd arrange a boatman, and they'd all go to the village on the other side. They could even go on foot around the lake, and it would be a real hike. And now the request is not to go far from the camp, from the manor, except to go down to the beach and to the bridges. Then Mallory called them to lunch. The dining room was small, not like the one at the boarding house. At the boarding house they had a whole room to themselves, but here they were at home at one table. The window was ajar, and the rainwash garden smelled so sweetly of freshness and roses. Mallory carried on a tray bowls of steaming borscht, potatoes and mushrooms. She also had her specialty, raspberry kissel. When a ray of sunlight fell on the glasses, they burned with a soft opalescent light. And even Nancy, who was so proud of her slim waist, couldn't refuse the sugar-sweetened buns. Girls, I'm gonna be such a Quasimodo in here. She unzipped her skirt. Nancy. Girls, I'm going to do my best to keep my figure. Happy, Natalie. Naomi, on the other hand, wasn't fat. It was surprisingly harmonious with her soft personality, her gentle voice. Naomi stood at the window, looking thoughtfully at the lake, and suggested, "Let's go for a walk." Everyone agreed except Casey. Casey got so sick on the way that her mentors persuaded her to go down to the dining room and put something in her mouth. But she still didn't feel well, and now she said she was going to try to get a couple hours of sleep. I was up all night on that goddamn bus. Now I'm sitting up and my eyes are closing. They let her go in peace. It was only a short walk to the beach, a path to the shore, that's all. However, this place could be called a beach only conditionally. Just a strip of sand, about 10 meters long. If they ever open a tourist resort here, such a patch will definitely not be enough. but the water was clean and warm, and the bottom was sandy too. There were no stones, not even small ones. At first, the girls regretted that they had gone for a walk without changing into swimsuits beforehand. Some of them returned to the room after them. Lenka brought a ball and began to play in it, going into the water. It was very convenient if you missed the ball, and it was floating next to you. You didn't have to bend down. Nellie sat on the bridge, not joining any of the little companies. The girls didn't go anywhere else. They sunbathed and swam until it started to get dark. "Girls, are the windows here not open at all?" Naomi asked at breakfast. It was so hot at night. I tried to open the window. "Well, let the mosquitoes. I brought Raptor with me. But I thought at least I would breathe the night air." I tugged on the frame, nothing. Now I had to take a pill for my headache. Nellie had her head down and was tracing patterns on the jam with a teaspoon. I was hot, too. Veronica yawned, covering her mouth with her palm, but I went downstairs, opened the door and sat on the porch. "Oh, Nellie, why are you looking at me like that?" Nellie hastily averted her eyes so that Veronica wouldn't read the horror in them. "Girls, let's go for a walk to the village today," Caroline suggested, stirring her tea. "That's what the chauffeur told us yesterday. We won't go by boat, we'll walk along the shore, bypassing it. What are we going to do here all day? Swimming again?" "No, I understand. The isolation here is great, but it's boring, and there's no internet. You can't watch a movie." "Angelica, can you let me go?" Natalie asked the teacher who had just entered the dining room. "Eh? What? Where to?" When Angelica heard about the girls' plans, she volunteered to go with them. She realized that it would be impossible to keep the young people on the estate. These are not fishermen hunting. The girls would be looking for fun. Mallory told her that it was a long way to the village, but there was a good road. It would be much worse if the young people went to the ancient ruins of the city of the dead. There it was necessary to know perfectly well the narrow path between the swamps. It was better not to go without a chaperone. The girls gathered leisurely, though Angelica was in a hurry. "If we want to be back by lunchtime, it's a long way. We can only get there and back in time. We don't have bicycles like Mallory, and we don't have a boat either." But while Natalie was running for her hat and Betty was looking for her camera, which had fallen to the bottom of her bag, Veronica was pouring water into a bottle. "You're the only one with discipline," Angelica praised Nellie, who had been standing next to her for a long time, waiting for the other girls. In fact, the distance was even greater than they had anticipated, and the road was boring. The forest on both sides, and there was no end to it. The girls' legs were tired, and Nellie's eyes were tired. She looked around continuously, trying not to attract the attention of others. Was there anything unusual, something she needed to remember? Everything was quiet. When they finally reached the village, they were disappointed. It was a poor place. A few dusty streets, scattered far from each other houses, all as one modest. No one lived here richly. That's all. A store that looked like a barn was the only one. And, of course, they sell everything from bread to winter boots. Nancy snorted as she ran off the porch. "Well, at least we'll know where to buy lemonade and toothpaste," Caroline tried to reassure her. "Look," Selena pointed, "aren't those the ruins of the temple?" "You're sharp-eyed," Angelica wondered. "I wouldn't have noticed." It was indeed once a church, but not only were the domes gone, but the bell tower was almost destroyed. The plaster had crumbled almost completely, exposing the crimson bricks. The whole place was thickly overgrown with grass, and lilac bushes crowded in, covering both the church and the cemetery that stretched behind it. "Come on, let's go and see." Natalie lit up. "And if we cannot go in there?" objected, however, not categorically, Angelica, hurrying after the girls. "Bricks fall from the ceiling there." "Yeah, and right on our heads." Nancy stumbled, not noticing the groove, hidden by the honey-scented yellow flowers. What air there was! Caroline was indifferent to old architecture, and she was in a dreamy mood. She liked everything here. The sunny, warm day, the vast sky. You don't see it like this in the city, from horizon to horizon. And the clouds as light as white fluff. And this path they were walking on, with wildflowers on both sides, white, blue, purple. You could pick a bunch in 5 minutes. As they approached the church, it became clear that the place was not entirely abandoned. Here, next to it, there was a prayer house, an obvious novelty, a rectangular brick structure, an icon of St. Nicholas above the entrance. People did not restore the old temple. The destruction was already irreversible. It was easier to demolish, and a large construction people could not cope. Not for the money, but the places prayed, so they put here this house, where believers gathered on weekends and holidays. The door opened, and a tall young man in a black monk's robe stood on the threshold. He must have heard voices and decided to welcome the guests. "How many of you there are?" He turned to the girls, surprised and happy. "Have you come for a tour?" "We are," said Nancy. "We are from the old manor," explained Angelica, blotting her sweating forehead with a handkerchief. "City girls who will be vacationing here in the summer. So here we are. Today we have some local sightseeing. Interested in the temple? It deserves it. Built in the 18th century. See the bricks. They used to add eggs to the lime mortar for strength. And after the revolution, the first thing they did was to remove the bells from the church, load them on a barge, and take them for melting. But there was a miracle. The bells somehow slipped into the water and sank. The matter was at night. During the day people dived, but they could not find them anywhere. So now they lie at the bottom of the lake and wait for their time. It is not Kitechgrad here, of course, but the lake still has its wonders." Nellie approached, and almost for the first time the girls heard her voice. "What may I call you?" "Father Steve." "Steve?" The young man smiled a little shyly. "It's a tradition that the parish here is served by a monk in the rank of priest." "Father Steve, and the crypt. The one where the old count was buried, it's here too, isn't it? What's left of it?" "Oh, that." The monk's face became sullen. "Have you heard enough of our local horror stories? Are you into the otherworldly too? It's a big sin. If you're believers, you should confess it. How many of you are Orthodox?" Several girls raised their hands, just like in school, but Nellie didn't turn around. She looked Father Steve straight in the eye. "Show me this place, please," she asked. And there was something in her tone. The monk shrugged and led the girls down the path. There was little left of the old church fence, stones lying in the grass. All the rest had long ago been scattered by the locals for construction, for fixing their houses. A few graves were inside the fence. The rest of the cemetery was on the other side of it. But here, inside, almost on the border, near the gate, there was a stone structure surprisingly well preserved. It reminded the girls of something even fairy tale-like. The entrance was framed by 2 columns, a pointed spire, stone carvings, steps, a rusty iron door, a metal pattern, crosses. The day was dry and warm, but here, in this corner, there was obvious dampness, and so the moss hid the base. "Here," Father Steve said with a slight chuckle, pointing to the crypt, "only there is no authentic evidence of the old count's connection with demons. A sinner, of course, but who's without sins? But he gave a lot of money to the parish, and a lot of it, yes." The iron door was ajar, and, of course, all the girls hurried into the crypt. What was inside? It was empty and uninteresting. A small space where all the boarders could barely fit. Dirty walls, damp, cold. The thick stone walls did not let the summer heat in. "Isn't there a dead man?" Nancy's sharp voice came from the crypt. "That's how stupid they are," Angelica said in an apologetic tone, trying to smooth things over, and then raised her voice. "Ira, we were told the crypt was empty a long time ago." Nellie managed to squat down in the crowd of boarders. She ran her hand over the stone slabs and said, "He was lying over there, under the floor." "Where?" Nancy squatted so sharply that she almost bumped her forehead. "Help me move the slab, just a little." Immediately, hands reached for the stove in unison. Thin fingers, manicured fingernails, someone's exclamation. "Oh girls, hold on, don't drop or she'll kick me now." I managed to lift the slab and push it away. It's good that Angelica didn't see it. "Well, what do you see?" Casey demanded. She, because of her size, was especially difficult to squeeze between the girls. "There's nothing there," Natalie answered disappointedly, bending over. "It's like a cellar, just for storing potatoes. There was probably a coffin in there. One or more. Convenient. You don't have to dig a grave, and you can look at the dearly departed at any time. Shall we close up? We're gonna get in trouble," Betty said. "Wait a minute." Nellie sat down and froze. Yes, there was no one there for a long time. Natalie was right. The underground room looked like a cellar. The church thieves had long ago taken everything, if anything, from here. There wasn't even a candle burner left, just bare stone and darkness. And all those girls, you know, the ones who disappeared, is that true? Fiction? Angelica asked Steve's father. "Oh please, there were a lot of people dying back then. It's quite possible that there was some epidemic, smallpox, cholera. The dead were buried separately, not in the common cemetery. I haven't looked up the documents, you know. There's enough already. Recently, these very same, either psychics or ufologists came here, and some of them are baptized. I say to them, say, work for the glory of God, help me in the old church, take out the garbage. There are frescoes preserved there. I keep hoping, maybe for their sake, the church will start to restore. No, let them into the crypt, that's all." And everyone was asking me if I knew anything else about the old count. Why must a monk, not just a priest, serve here? What kind of tradition is that? Nellie brushed her blonde hair off her forehead. Steve just waved his hand. "Ah, it's a tradition from the time when the prayers of an old monk brought this place to life. You're bringing me back to this topic again." They were not only ungodly late for lunch, but almost missed dinner. It became clear that it would be impossible to go to the village often. It was too far away. Everyone was tired, and the girls complained that their legs hurt. Mallory sympathized and promised that the next time they decided to make a trip, they would make arrangements with the boatman, as it would be quicker and easier. The porridge prepared by the cook did not arouse enthusiasm. They were hungry, but, as Casey said, not that hungry. They started gutting their supplies, pulling out the last of the things they had in their bags after the long journey. Mallory left immediately after dinner, saddling up on her old bicycle, just as the dust was gathering. The girls took the moment to make coffee, to feel like mistresses in the kitchen. Selena found bread and made toast. They didn't sit in the dining room, but at the long board table by the stove, drank coffee, and didn't leave for a long time. They discussed the trip to the village and agreed that everyone would like the crypt to be a little scarier. Well, like Stephen King, when you read a book, and then in his own house afraid to go to the bathroom at night, said Angelica. But if all this was true, where was the Count hiding the bodies? Naomi shuddered slightly, maybe in these very swamps, in the marshes. Tied them up with something heavy, and... yeah, and now they're all wandering around as ghosts. Nancy wrung her hands and admired the shadows they cast on the walls. From scary stories, the conversation turned to the mundane topic of what to do tomorrow. It seemed that now every evening she would have to think about what to do the next day. An endlessly long summer day. Swim until exhaustion. Learn to fish. Check the nearby forest if there are no mushrooms and berries. Angelica listened a little, smiling. When the girls fell silent, not finally agreeing on anything, she said with a slight smile, "I've made a deal with someone here. Tomorrow the local guys will bring you horses. You can ride." Veronica even clapped her hands. She was so happy. "Just listen carefully to what they tell you. The guys know horses, and if I'm not mistaken, there are no experienced riders among you, Natalie instructed. Naomi returned. No one had noticed that she had already gone to bed, and said irritably, "Who in my room has screwed the window on that very wire again? It took me half an hour to unscrew it this morning. I can't sleep in the air. Who's got a mania for making braids out of wire? Go on, open up." Of course, no one confessed. Naomi left with one last thing to say. "I'm going to twist it for the last time. If it happens again tomorrow, I'll take the mattress out on the lawn and sleep there." The morning found Nellie sitting on the porch. It was that hour of dawn when some fall asleep and others wake up. Nellie realized that now she could go out. The sun was about to rise, and the fog that now swirled over the lake was no longer a threat. She got up and straightened herself with difficulty. Her legs were stiff. Nellie was cold and tired. If she could lie down under a warm blanket now, there would be no need for horses. She yawned and walked. She didn't know why. Toward the lake. Maybe because she thought she saw a figure in the fog. But there was no one and she had to go back. Veronica, in her nightgown, leaned out of the window, listening to the birds singing. "Are those nightingales?" She called to Nellie. "I can't tell them apart at all, but they sing in a way that makes my heart weep." Breakfast did not arouse enthusiasm. For some reason, all the cooks of the world, if it is an organized feeding, whether it is children in kindergarten or ailing in the sanatorium, cooks always in the morning cook porridge. The smell of hot milk made Nellie start to feel slightly nauseous. Veronica smeared the porridge with a spoon. She didn't want to upset Mallory, so she pretended to eat, or at least she was about to start. Caroline sighed and said to no one in particular, "I like to put caviar on my sandwich at home in the morning. And a cup or two of tea, of course." Nancy gave the plate a look of disgust. "I'm going for a smoke," she said. If there were teachers around, Nancy managed to say the word smoke like a ventriloquist without moving her lips. You couldn't tell who said it, or if she said it at all. A few of the girls looked at her. All of them could not leave immediately after her. Otherwise, Angelica would immediately raise her voice. "Where are you all rushing off to?" "Well, back." We were silent for a minute. "Well, no one dreamed of any ghosts?" Naomi asked, more to change the subject. Nellie raised her head and looked closely at the girls. As no one answered, Naomi went on. "I thought I'd sleep on my feet after last night's walk. I've only had one period in my life when I had very vivid dreams, as they say nowadays, triples. But that was after antidepressants. My parents were getting divorced, I was crying all the time, and my doctor prescribed them. Girls, there was such a strange feeling, as if you live in a different reality and do not want to leave it. And then yesterday, that is, tonight, again. But I haven't taken any pills for a long time. And the only sedative I have with me is an aroma pendant with molasses. If Nancy hadn't left, she would have said that other people's dreams are the most boring thing imaginable. But Nancy wasn't there, so Nellie asked, "What did you dream?" "My dead brother," Naomi said. "I still think he's the reason my parents split up. We were little. I was 8, Anthony was 3. And my mom let us out to play in the yard. You know, an 8-year-old kid, right? You forget you're the little kid. You turn your back. You're a little kid yourself," Natalie said. "And girls, I still don't know how the car hit him." She hid her face in the palms of her hands. Her silky long hair fell on the table, becoming her second line of defense against other people's gazes. So much time has passed, and I still can't tell it all coherently. I just remember bits and pieces, like dots and dashes. Well, don't. No, I'll tell you, because, first, there was a short scream, something absolutely inhuman. Then immediately, well, it was not immediately, of course, it all merged for me. Ambulance under flashing lights. My mom and I are both there. I hold on very tightly, because the car is rushing so fast, that I think I'm about to be torn from the seat, and I'll hang like in weightlessness. And these turns in Medgarodok along the paths, here and there, I was skidding. Then the adults all jump on the ground one by one, the stretcher rattles, and I get out last, by myself. Everyone forgot about me. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting alone in the hallway. No mom, no one. I realize that everything is with Anthony, and I wait, petrified with horror. And then, after an eternity, they're in the office behind me. The phone rings and one nurse says to another, "A boy has died." And I went in and I said, "Dead?" I don't know what they saw on my face because they both rushed over to comfort me. "No, honey, everything is fine." And I don't remember anything else, not even the funeral. Now, I think my father never forgave my mother for that, for sending Anthony to the yard with just me. She didn't go herself, didn't look after me. From then on, we were not a family, but like fragments. If you say the wrong word, look at something of Jerkins that comes under your hand. It's as if you cut yourself deeply and painfully. There was silence for a moment. Naomi perked up. "So, tonight I dreamt I was at home, and Anthony came into my room. He's a big, grown-up guy. He's wearing a black hoodie with a hood, and he's taking my paintings off the wall, picking up my stuff off the table. He's got a big gym bag in his hands, and he's putting everything in it. I ask him, 'What are you doing?' He says, 'Show me what else is yours and I'll take it with me. And I'll take you with me.' I don't realize in my dream that he is dead, and I help him. I give him one thing and another so that I don't forget anything. And then we go ashore. It's so early in the morning that you can't tell whether it's still night or dawn. There's a fog over the lake, only over the water, as if it were not a lake, but some kind of smoking bowl. There are thick reeds on the shore, and my brother has a boat hidden there. I follow him and ask, 'Will you help me into the boat? I'm so clumsy. Is it deep? Are there leeches?' And he's already in the boat, standing in his black hoodie, with his back to me, and he's not holding an oar, but a pole. My brother says, 'You stay here, I'll be right behind you.'" Miss Tika, Nancy came back smelling so much of cigarette smoke that she would have been in trouble if Angelica had been there. "They say you dream of the dead when the weather changes." Veronica, as always, wanted to reassure everyone. She could see that Naomi was uncomfortable. They finished breakfast in silence, and then Veronica volunteered to help Mallory clear the table and wash the dishes. The girls had not yet had a chance to leave the dining room when there was a clatter of heels. Natalie, even here in the field, did not allow herself to relax. Her hair was smoothly combed, her dark blue suit, a string of pearls around her neck, heeled shoes. As if it were not the estate of an old count, lost on a peninsula, but the native walls of a boarding house. Natalie looked around at all her charges. The girls knew from experience that it was hard to hide anything from her gaze. She would notice everything from a hole in their tights to a boarder's bad mood. I said, "We're not going anywhere. We have an interesting program for today. Studying what grows around the house, learning to tell the difference between a dandelion and a forget-me-not, counting crows." Nancy began in her ventriloquist whisper. Natalie headed straight for her. She held out her open palm. "Cigarettes." "Bummer. Nancy, searching is not my style, but you won't be out of the manor for the rest of the vacation. It's up to you. Either you give me the cigarettes now, or I'm locking your room up. I'll move your roommate over to Nellie's, and you'll be a prisoner of the castle of If. I want you to breathe clean air here, not poison yourself. You have one lung for life." Natalie generally knew the futility of this fight. Nancy had been smoking since she was 12, and now, of course, she had her stash of smokes tucked away. So taking one pack away from her now wouldn't make much difference. But Nancy would have to hide her cigarettes even more carefully, and do her best not to get caught. If she pretended that the teachers didn't notice, tomorrow half the girls would start smoking cigarettes without hiding. "Naomi, While everyone was distracted by Nancy with her pack of cigarettes in the inside pocket of her jacket, Nellie quietly tugged the girl's sleeve. "You can't go away with me for a quarter of an hour. They said not to go anywhere. We'll be right back. We'll walk to the lake. Do you remember the place you dreamed about?" "Yeah, I think so," Naomi said uncertainly. "There was this little grove, an aspen grove. The moon was shining, and the leaves fluttered in the breeze and looked silver. It was beautiful. Can you show me?" "Why?" Naomi was surprised. Nellie looked at her in silence. "Really? Why?" "Maybe I had the same dream." She answered the question with a question. "The lake, the fog, I want to check." She couldn't explain anything yet. There were mysteries in front of her that had to be solved before someone, or something, would come to their senses. Surprisingly, Naomi, who suffered from what she called geographic cretinism, compounded by the fact that she couldn't navigate at all without her glasses, found the place she had dreamed about. Exactly, she was happily surprised. "Wow, it's exactly like my dream. Only now there is absolutely no night creepiness here. Of course, in the daytime, in the sunshine. But believe me, I wasn't scared even then. Some people are afraid of dead people, but I missed Yoka so much that I was happy to see him. Honestly, I woke up and my pillow was wet. I didn't want him to leave." "I believe so," Nellie said briefly. She was used to looking around differently than the others. She didn't look around, didn't take a few futile steps in each direction. Forward, backward, what's there? She stood there, frozen, her eyes moving from object to object. At times like this, she thought she could see even with her back. She didn't have to turn around to see danger. "The subconscious mind is an amazing thing," Naomi said knowingly. "I must have memorized this place yesterday afternoon when we were walking here, and now I've seen it. The aspens are just ordinary during the day, and their leaves are green. At night, they were much more beautiful, like silver coins. They seemed to jingle. Do you happen to know why the aspen is considered a mystical tree? Well there, the aspen's stake in the legends." Nellie shuddered a little. "Because Judas Iscariot hanged himself on an aspen tree. That's how it's believed. That's why the ancients believed the tree could overcome evil forces. Thank you for bringing me here. I didn't expect to find it." Naomi continued to marvel. "Does it look like what you were dreaming about? And we should probably get back." At a gallop, Nellie said, to avoid answering the last question. Yes, she didn't doubt it. Everything was ordinary. An ordinary, not even a very well-trodden path winded along the shore of the lake. The reeds grew thickly on the right. They left a passage to the big water. A narrow boat could pass through here. But then there would be footprints on the shore. But there were no footprints. Even the grass was not mown. Behind the aspen grove there was a real forest, a dense wall of trees. I could only walk a little ahead along the path to see what was there. But there was really no time. Nellie restrained herself from talking to Naomi. She was anxious to have a friend among the girls. The promised interesting program was horses. In the courtyard of the manor, there was a joyful excitement. The horses were already saddled by two boys. Both were dressed very simply. Some quilted jackets of protective color, the same pants, dusty boots. But one of the guys had a very rustic look, and it was obvious that he was terribly shy of so many girls. In any case, no one heard his voice. Barry, the second guy, introduced himself. He was dark, short, pleasant-looking, and Veronica licked her lips involuntarily. She had pink lipstick on, slightly shiny, and smelled like caramel. Angelica explained that Barry was the owner of the equestrian club nearby, and now they were all going horseback riding. At first, there seemed to be a lot of horses, but there were only as many horses as there were girls and escorts. The horses are the simplest, Bashkas, short, with big heads, and one of the boarders hummed a little. Nellie realized that ordinary girls would have been delighted and rushed to feed and pet the horses. But here were the elite. Some of the boarders had been riding for a long time, and some of them had their own stables at home. The most she had learned was to approach a horse without fear and to climb up without support. "Where are we going?" Nancy asked. She did not hesitate long and was already in the saddle. She had chosen a single white stallion from a small herd, and his eyes were blue. "What's his name?" "Lemon," Barry answered. Of course, everyone immediately started taking the horses apart and asking their names. Lucia had to be put in the saddle, and 3 of them, besides Jenya, Angelica, and Natalie, were pushing her up. Natalie couldn't take it anymore. "Maybe I shouldn't go." Naomi was immediately concerned. "I feel sorry for the horse. Her back would crack." "You should see what kind of big manor horses have to carry." Barry grinned. "Under 100 pounds, and if it's a few days' hike, with backpacks and tents and all that." Beneath him was a handsome raven-haired Dariel. Most girls would not dare to approach him. The mighty horse stepped on the spot and roared a little, hurrying his master. The wife didn't need stirrups. Just standing on the ground, one elusive movement, and he was already in the saddle. "We have several routes," he said. "If you want, we will go to Trinity with an overnight stay. It's a beautiful place we've arranged. The mountains are nearby. The lake again. We'll bathe with horses. We'll weave wreaths. Jump over the fire." Angelica, feeling that she was now replacing Natalie, looked at the murmuring girls vigilantly. But, she said, We'll see how you behave. And now we're going to the hunting lodge," Barry explained. "We've been asking for a tourist shelter for a long time, but the authorities won't let us use it. The lodge belongs to the estate, it's part of it." Was it really hunted here? Who was hunted? Are these animals still here? And who is the most dangerous one here? Barry tried to answer all the questions at once. The most dangerous are ticks, so it's best to wear long-sleeved clothes, boots or at least socks, and something on your head. Caps, kerchiefs. Well, you can meet a boar. Rarely, very rarely. Don't worry, I haven't seen one this year. What a boar! When we went to Bakel, there's an ecological trail, and it said, "Who where? Bears." The guys that I asked the forester, "Is it true that you can meet bears? What should we do then?" The man looked at us so calmly and said, "Well, there are 3 of you. It is unlikely that they will approach. If anything, shout at them louder." "What about snakes?" one of Angelique asked. "I saw one here, by the way." "Yeah, I heard you yelling," threw Nancy off the horse. "It wasn't even crawling. It was like a trickle of water flowing. Black and so fast, right at my feet." Most of the time, Barry explained condescendingly, "If you get those yellow spots on your face, you're off the hook. You can even pick it up. A viper's more unpleasant, of course, but it won't just rush in. I was fishing the other day, and I saw such a big viper there. It was hissing and hissing, trying to scare me. Only when I touched it with my boot, then it had nowhere to go. It jumped in. But the boot, of course, could not bite through." "Why did you?" Naomi began, obviously about to say something along the lines of provoking the poor viper. But then Barry remembered, raised his hand, and said in Mallory's words, "Swamps. That's what I forgot to tell you. You and I will take the trail now, and we'll take the trail back. There's nothing to be afraid of. But God forbid, if you take the same route to explore what's there on the left and right. You can get into such a quagmire. You can drown 10 times before you call for help and people come. It would be good if they could find where you drowned." Barry looked around at the boarders and made sure they were all on horseback. "Let's move," he said, "and let Dariel follow the trail to the woods." Barry was used to taking care of campers who were mounting horses for the first time in their lives. And often they were stiff, uncomfortable, shaky, and scared. That's why the horses, except Dariel, were so phlegmatic that it was extremely difficult to make them trot. And under the saddles, besides the vultraps, lay the furs. Barry, who rode in front, warned of every branch overhanging the path, and his assistant, Mike, who closed the cavalcade, was vigilant to see that none of the horses bucked, though they could hardly think of it. The day was so clear and warm, sunny and serene, that any mysticism seemed like a dream. If not dreamed in a dream, then glimpsed in a reverie. Even the shadows were cheerful now. The leaves fluttered, the branches swayed, the grass swayed. The shadows were playing with people and with each other. Angelica, who was quite fit on her horse, called out to Barry, "Perhaps you will tell us now about the place we are going to." Yes, of course." Barry raised his voice so that everyone, including Michael, could hear him. It was originally all one. What would now say a project, a complex, and the hunting lodge was built even earlier than the manor house. They did it quickly. It was supposed that here, first of all, the Count himself would live while the big estate was being built. Secondly, it was easier to get here from the mainland and back, and thirdly, here you can really not be afraid of flooding. The lake overflows in the spring. We say hunting lodge, but in fact, today in our understanding it is a hut in the forest. But this is a beautiful cottage. Well, it was, and in his time, when the Count was alive, he often went there. Hunting? Lucy asked. I don't think so. There were so many animals there in his day that hunters couldn't get rid of wolves for a long time afterward. There were even bears here. It was unlikely that an avid hunter would have animals walking right under his nose. Nowadays it is difficult to meet a wolf. He can smell a man from afar and hides. I only once last year, when we were camping with tourists, heard a howl at night and came to look. It wasn't a full-grown wolf. It was just a teenage wolf. Still, he realized that I was nearby and only gray heels glistened. And then, the old wolf could sit on the edge of the thicket and look at people. What are you going to do? So I think the master's temper was peculiar, and he would just leave here so no one could find him. No guests, no surprise visitors. So what was he doing here anyway? Casey kept up. Barry shrugged. The hell knows. Probably reading. They said there was a big library here. Maybe he was writing his memoirs. Two things that might seem surprising are that the servants' quarters are one small room. Apparently, the Count didn't like servants either. There was no chapel or anything to do with religion. Was he a pagan or something? And after his death, the place was abandoned first. Why? It was Angelica who asked. It's a deep forest. The lake is far away. What's there to do? The Count had no hares left, and none of the locals would have thought of going hunting so far away and using such houses. They want everything simple. A simple hut in the woods with a stove and wood, and that's enough. Even now, when they begin to restore the estate, no one remembers about the hunting lodge. It is quite badly destroyed. There are no roads to bring construction materials. And again, tourists get bored in the forest. They want a lake, a beach. I've got my eye on the cabin. It suited us, I mean the club. We could go there by horseback. It's 2 hours. It's convenient. We could make a break there. We could at least use the first floor as a shelter. And if we stay there for one night, people would also be interested. You know, they would tell different legends. The atmosphere there is suitable for that. Inside, of course, everything had been plundered. Only the walls remained, but the architecture. It became clear when the riders reached the place. The house lived in a clearing surrounded by a forest. Exactly the feeling was formed, not standing, but living. Becoming a part of this place, it greeted the dawns here, survived the winters. At night, it was illuminated by the greenish moon, and in spring the roads to it became impassable. In fact, it was only in summer that one could come here to see this enchanted prince, who could not be awakened from his heavy sleep. The house was indeed small, but it surprised with its architecture at the first glance. Though it was indeed badly damaged. The roof was gone, and the walls, once covered with white plaster, were now stripped of it. revealing dark red bricks. There are 2 columns at the entrance and a small tower on the right, a tetrahedron where the tall, narrow windows are still intact, 3 on each side of the world. Are we going to have a picnic inside? Casey asked with eager curiosity. No, Barry laughed. We'd have to clean the place up first. Look at the inside. It's all junk. There's not even anything left that's good enough for a fire. But don't go upstairs. The stairs are decrepit. You hear that, girls? Did you all hear? Angelica asked with pressure. Only downstairs you can walk very carefully. The girls jumped off their horses, and some of them slid down. No one thought of tying up their horse or taking care of it. They were all in a hurry to get home. And if it had not been for Mike, who had taken care of the little herd, there was still to be learned that prudence, without which there was no way, especially when help was far away. Barry was right, though. There wasn't much to see inside the house. Empty rooms, 2 small ones, one for the servants and one for the kitchen. There was a hall with a fireplace and a bright room with a bay window, perhaps the master's study or library. The panes had long since been knocked out, of course. There was little left of the twisted metal staircase to climb the tower. Something strange was happening to Nellie. She was the last to enter the house, but she saw something different from the others. She saw something different. Her mind was all jumbled up. A child of the 21st century, she could only compare what was happening to a 3-decade movie theater, when you see and feel what no one outside the walls knows. Could she be going crazy already? Even for sure, it was as if Nellie lived in today's day, but she also belonged to that bygone era. It was as if she had lived in this house for years and could remember what she had done yesterday, and think of what she would do tomorrow. In the hall, where the other girls' eyes had seen shabby floorboards and a dilapidated, failing ceiling, she saw smooth floorboards of a strange, almost black wood. A sofa covered with green cloth. Part of the wall above the fireplace was stone, and a fire burned in the hearth itself, and its glare cast reflections, shadows and shadows, all of which gave birth to a huge face or face. Was it a monster or some ancient demon whose image appeared before her? Had imagination alone created him? And what kind of man could sit here for hours, tossing wood on the fire, staring mesmerized at the ugly features, the stretched black lips that curved as if to whisper something? Mother, Nancy touched Nellie's shoulder. Are you going to eat or what? It's the last of the spatchcock left in there. The girls will eat it all up, and you'll be left to chew grass with the horses. In the afternoon, the weather suddenly turned bad, and it rained. And it was not a noisy and fleeting downpour, which is only a joy. What clean air afterwards, how it smells like flowers and herbs, and everything around, bright and shining, washed by the hand of the sky. No, this rain was cold and cold. Maybe it would be sunny again, Veronica asked hopefully. The words, however, were addressed to nowhere, as was the hope of clear weather. Mallory shook her head. My grandfather used to say, if it rains in the morning, put on a hat and drive out of the yard. And if it rains in the afternoon, I'm not going anywhere. That's what I was afraid of. Lucy's face was as impenetrable as ever. When you all got so excited. The old manor house, the countryside, the first rain, and we're all locked in here. It'll be damp and cold and boring. There's nowhere to go. The house is old. It's not just a split system. You'd be afraid to turn on the heater. What are we gonna do till tonight, huh? Would you like some hot pies? Pitying the girls, Mallory suggested. You want them with potatoes or sweet, with jam. But Angelique knew her flock too well. Some young ladies would not even eat oysters. Better make us some tea, Mallory, she asked. Well, what's the matter, girls? We've all got telephones. Back home at the boarding house, you can't get off the internet. Here you can chat as much as you want. Books, embroidery. We could have some kind of contest. Songs, for example. Oh, don't do that, please. Lucy arched her eyebrows as if she had a headache. All these efforts, I'll cheer myself up. It's like a bad mass entertainer. Eventually, we scattered to our rooms, realizing it was going to be damp and cold. Maybe the Count used to build a fireplace here in this weather. Now all that was left was to wrap themselves in blankets and go to the kitchen for tea again and again. Some of the girls had gone to bed early, and there were some who could sleep all day long. But in Nancy and Natalie's room, there was a whole bunch of them. They played cards for a while, then got bored. They were going to ask Lucia to bring a guitar, but they changed their minds. Angelica loves it when they play. Now she'll come, Selena expressed her apprehension, and she'll sit with us all evening. And now let's sing this one, and let's sing that one. Nobody wanted to organize a concert of bardic songs by request. And look in the internet about this Count, suddenly asked Lucy. We went here just vacation in the nature, while everywhere COVID, away from infection. And here, people talk about everything. These local legends. You don't want to believe them out of the blue. You feel like a fool. Nellie's ears perked up. At first, she thought it strange that Lucy had made this request of the cynical Nancy, who saw mysticism only from the point of view of fun. Later she'd learned that Ira was an ace at computers and the World Wide Web, and even from a smartphone she could get things out that other girls couldn't find. Nancy didn't seem to heed the request. She was lying on the bed with her foot on her leg, and her narrow foot in a knitted striped sock was swaying not far from Nellie's. But the telephone was in Nancy's hand, as indeed it was in everyone's. The girls had gotten so comfortable with their cell phones that it never even occurred to anyone to leave a smartphone in the room. Suddenly, Nancy gave a little whistle. "Did you find something?" Selena asked. "Well, girls, just a grim fairy tale." "What did you find?" Selena settled herself against Nancy's headboard, and she turned the screen slightly toward her. Nellie approached quietly, peering over Selena's shoulder. "I found it on a local history website. Of course, fairy tales. There's a group here engaged in anomalous phenomena." "So, what? The Count of the Green Men is going to be?" No, Mother. But look at the good company he's in. Look at the titles of the articles. There's the one about the meteorite that fell into the lake here. There's the one about an underground passage under the lake, and it's actually the esophagus of some huge ancient mammal. Fossilized, of course. Now get the Count. He's so handsome, even his portrait is preserved. All the girls huddled around Nancy. Nellie didn't need to look. She knew who she was going to see. The same face that had been split in two by the play of light, luminous, pale on one side and drowning in darkness on the other. "Girls, is he stoned or something?" Naomi asked uncertainly. "Look at him, rolling his eyes." "It's possible," Nancy nodded. "And they say he's going underground. That means..." "What?" "I've read it. All the locals have known for a long time, I'm talking about the 19th century, that there are minerals here, and lots of them. A lot of them is when there is a deposit. But the authorities were in no hurry to start mining. If gold and diamonds were one thing, but with iron ore, they didn't bother. It was a remote place. It was a long way to start from scratch. But when this Count Pal arrived, the locals thought at first that he would do it. He'll start mining, build a factory. Some rejoiced. He would hire local men to work. Those who regretted. What did people live here before? Hunting, fishing, berries, mushrooms, honey. And now, they say, they'll use up the forest and build roads. And Pal had a great company. A mining engineer, then a servant with one eye. He was the Count's right-hand man. And they called in the local sorcerer. What they asked him about some caves, about underground passages. The sorcerer didn't tell the locals anything. He waved his hand. I can't do it. And it won't end well for the Count. It's not something he's taken a swing at, what a man is allowed to do. When the sorcerer returned from the estate, he became a hermit. He wouldn't let anyone in, locked himself up at night with 3 locks. And what was he needed for? Lucy raised her thin eyebrows again. It was the 19th century. Christianity was long ago. There was a church in the village. He could heal toothache, stop bleeding, perform various reversals, and people came to him. I see, stretched Natalie. In short, he was like that grandmother, who at the icon of the Last Judgment, the devil put a candle to the devil. She said she had to have a little man in hell. You don't know where you'll end up when you die. And then the sorcerer left, Nancy said, and they say he whispered to a fellow villager in farewell that it was impossible to stay here now, because he had found the place where you can pass from the world of the dead to the world of the living. It's all on blood, he said, and he'll soon suck your blood. The locals thought that the old man had gone mad. That's why he left the place. And then there was this whole missing girls thing. Brothers Grimm, I told you from the beginning, and you saved me. Nellie continued, please don't think I'm like him, like my father. In a little while, I'll be out of school and out of the family. I've never felt warmth from my dad. He's always been a stranger to me. I'll get on my feet and look for my mom. It's hard when you don't have a soulmate in your life, isn't it? Michael held Nellie's thin hand and hesitated to let go. He felt that in his heart he really had no malice toward this girl. He just looked at her, and it was hard for him to look away. And you saved me. Nellie continued, please don't think I'm like him, like my father. In a little while, I'll be out of school and out of the family. I've never felt warmth from my dad. He's always been a stranger to me. I'll get on my feet and look for my mom. It's hard when you don't have a soulmate in your life, isn't it? Michael held Nellie's thin hand and hesitated to let go. He felt that in his heart he really had no malice toward this girl. He just looked at her, and it was hard for him to look away.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.